Welcome back to the Winner Circle, everybody. I am here today with one of our great judges, Mike from Napier. Mike is a all-star B2B marketer. He's been in the space forever. We thought we knew each other from our telecom days, but it turns out he was in Silicon for the same name company. Very odd. Mike, welcome to the Winner Circle and congratulations on being such an awesome judge. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Russ. It's great to be a judge. You have so many great entries. I love reading them and hearing about what people in marketing and tech are doing and some of their achievements.
Yeah, I think it's fun because I think it's like a little mini Shark Tank about once a month. You get, kind of 5 to 10 nominations and you get to score them and read them and see what people are doing. I think it's interesting, but I've been doing it for 14 years. You've been in kind of B2B telecom for a very long time as well with Napier. Give us a little bit of an elevator pitch about kind of Napier and kind of how you got there.
Yeah, so I've never had a career plan, and my career's kind of shown that. Um, I went to university. I was going to be studying maths until about 9 months before I went and suddenly decided to change and study electronics. Um, I had a career as an electronics engineer. I actually quite enjoyed it, but the problem was I wasn't brilliant at electronic design. I've got to admit, the detail that you had to go into, and all the bits that weren't around the ideas. So really, that grunt work of doing the engineering wasn't my thing. But I realized I was really good at talking about it. So what I did was I moved into effectively a technical sales role, what's called applications engineering. I did that for a couple of companies. I ran a European apps team, which was absolutely awesome. Really enjoyed it. And then kind of got to the point, and in semiconductors, you typically get to the point where either you're moving to the States or you've kind of hit a bit of a plateau, particularly on the technical side. So what I decided to do was switch into marketing. So I switched into marketing, and then I mean, absolute truth, my company sent me on like a management development course. We all got drunk on the last night. And someone said to me, "Do you know what, Mike? You should run your own company." And actually now I realize that they were really polite and really lovely people. And actually what they were saying was, never apply for a job working for me because I really don't want to manage you. You'd be a nightmare. But I took it as being motivation. And ironically, around about 6 months after this happened, I'd kind of been thinking about it for a while. And then I got a call from someone at the agency I work with saying that the owners wanted to retire and sell. And basically Susie, who was there, she said, "I think you should buy it." And I thought, how hard can it be? I'd never been in an agency for a day in my life. So I generally had no idea. And the simple answer is, if you choose to buy a tech agency 3 weeks before the dot-com crash, it can actually be really quite hard.
That is a
So
tough
that's
one.
it. Yeah.
That is a tough one. The only one, I'm a one-upper, but the only one I'll give you there is I worked for a woman who was head of PR for WorldCom the day they got indicted.
Oh, yeah, that was a tough day, I imagine.
She
So
walked into
anyway,
the CEO's office and said, "Hi, I'm Cynthia." And she said, "Hi, I'm Gary, and I'm about to be indicted. Welcome." So
but I think, sorry, go on, Russ.
what is Napier's main focus? You guys are B2B. You've got this, extraordinary kind of, engineering technical background. How do those two things mash together as when you buy the agency?
Oh, yeah, I love that. So, I mean, I did have a sort of a plan. And what I could see was back in 2001, when I bought the agency, things were changing. The internet was already a bit of a thing, but it was going to be huge. And I realized that what was happening was the way that engineers got their information was going to change, and it was going to change really dramatically. So, when I started, most of the, direct marketing campaigns were postal mail, even in the electronics industry. Most people got their information from print publications. There was still these amazing print publications that, were just pages and pages of new products. That was all it was, a photo and about 3 sentences. Incredible today. I mean, younger people will not be believing how, difficult it was to get information. And I realized what was going to happen was the internet was going to give everybody access to everything. And so what would matter is really getting content out there that was high quality and that changed minds. And so it was going to need people to take a slightly different approach, and also an approach where you really understood what your audience wanted. So I thought it was an opportunity. As I say, probably buying the agency just before the dot-com crash was a bad move, but we survived it, made us very cautious, but we grew steadily and slowly, and have really built a business upon that. We're working with companies in telecoms, companies in semiconductors, companies in industrial automation, and really building a kind of full service marketing approach. And our view is that, having multiple different agencies trying to all reach that same person in the audience, all through different routes, all with different content, all with their own spin on messaging, is just less effective. So being able to help companies, reach a potential customer and reach them through multiple different channels, but making sure it's all consistent and also making sure it's all being done by people who understand that customer, that's the way to go, in my opinion, anyway.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about your career a little bit in that role that you took, kind of that engineering. It was like it sounded like a sales engineering role to me. I've always thought that was like almost one of the best roles you could ever have, because you're there to share your expertise, and that's really what those early days were. Were even in marketing and in all that content that we were developing, was it was really about sharing expertise on how to do things, how to make our customer lives better, generally with our product or with our information or whatever we're selling. But what's interesting now is that intelligence is everywhere, right? We don't have to go out and searching for it. How has that changed with AI coming through on the kind of that content marketing, industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good question. I wish I really knew what was going to happen over the next 5 years, because I could probably make a lot of money if I did. But the world is changing. I mean, AI is not going away. And I think people have to be realistic about AI, and more particularly about what AI can do for them and maybe what it can't do for them. So we're seeing AI seep into almost everything we do. But at the end of the day, AI is not as good as the best human in many different cases. Where AI does incredibly well is where you're doing things at volume. So my example would be, if you're writing a deeply technical article about a fairly unique product, AI is not great at doing that, because actually AI is just really regurgitating, bits of text it's seen before. And if you've got something genuinely new, AI really struggles, which is great because, it keeps us in business. So AI is not great at that. But if you want it to get, for example, little bits of customization in emails you're sending, and you're sending out, how many? It's 1,000, 5,000, 100,000. Humans can't do that. You can't scale a human to do that. But actually, AI, particularly if you put the right guardrails in, can do it really, really well. So we're seeing it come in all sorts of different places. And in sometimes it's actually doing the work, like, for example, personalizing emails. And then other times it's really kind of acting as, this classic assistant or the intern that people talk about. So it's more someone to bounce ideas off and help you get to, what you could create, but get there quicker.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like we're following down this, kind of that 90s, 2000s path all over again with AI. It's like we've got this, new problem with email in the 90s of getting too much email and it's all spam. And then we're all trying to get, our websites found by Google by doing things like putting white text on a white background and having dirty words in it so it finds us. And we're seeming to do all these tricks. Now we've got this new term GEO, generative engine optimization, or the other one is artificial intelligence optimization, AIO or AEO, I think I've heard.
AEO as
But it's
well.
basically
Yeah.
the same thing, right? How do
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
found? Because
Yeah.
now we're not searching, we're all, AIing. How does that change the game that you're seeing? Are you seeing that kind of that same swing, kind of this spam and gaming that we used to do?
So, I mean, that's such a great question, Russ, and it's really interesting to see what's happening. So, I mean, the first thing I'd say is actually what surprises me is how many brands are not focusing on AI visibility today. We see brands marketing as software engineers. Software is pretty much one of the most AI-driven industries there is, and they don't have a clear GEO strategy. So it surprised me people aren't doing it. Having said that, there's some good news. So the first is, if you've got a really good SEO strategy, and you've got really good optimized content, actually that's going to help you with GEO. So GEO, when you put a query into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, you'll see it saying searching the web. So actually, if your SEO is good, you're kind of, making a step there. And to be honest, if your SEO is terrible, forget about listening to the rest of this stuff about GEO. Fix your SEO first.
If you're wondering what
Um,
SEO is, stop
yeah.
listening.
So I mean, but it is interesting. But then the problem is, if you really want to do well, and quite often, we'll look at clients. We run a lot of analysis on clients and what they do, how they compare to competitors. And the way you do that, we've got tools to do it. You basically build a set of prompts. So you build a set of questions you think are going to be put into an AI. And that's very different from your search engine optimization or SEO, which was around specific keywords and very controllable. Prompts are really hard because, almost the one thing is the prompt you're testing is not the exact wording that's going to be used. There's going to be 100 different versions of it. But the great news is that actually if you hit, one particular prompt, all the similar ones will show basically similar results. So, you've got to think about it. And actually, there are definitely things you can do that optimize your presence well above what SEO does. And I think, the one example everybody talks about is putting an FAQ at the end of the article. So first thing, does putting an FAQ at the end of the article, if it's well written, does it increase the chances of an AI engine actually, using that information? Absolutely. There's no question about that. All the data I've seen, all the experiments I've run, absolutely, that definitely helps. So it's interesting, these simple hacks, they kind of work. And they're not necessarily going to hurt you in the long term. So I think what happens, you mentioned the early days of SEO, where people were, hiding white text on white backgrounds and things like that. That obviously wasn't a good thing.
No.
I think that was a really bad idea. The search engines, particularly Google, thought it was a really bad idea. And so they started penalizing people. But honestly, if you put, a summary in or a key takeaways in or an FAQ into an article, is that a bad thing for the human? Probably not. So I'd actually say that a lot of these techniques people are using, they're going to actually have legs on them. They're going to have longevity. There are people, for example, there's tools that will serve different content to the AI crawler than it serves to humans. I mean, I can't tell you for sure that's a bad idea, but believe me, there's no way I'd be letting that sort of tool on my website because the risk is so high. It's not unreasonable for an AI company to say, if I'm getting served different content to what the humans are, I don't trust the website. I'm not going to feature it. So
Yeah,
I
it
think
goes.
people have to be careful, but it's a lot, it's a lot less of a minefield than SEO, partly because we understand the issues.
Well, it was kind of how that content marketing moniker was born. Is that we had so many people kind of gaming SEO that they really overcompensated towards really native original content and the birth of content marketing. Kind of that white hat, really clean content. And now I think what you're talking about is all of those types of things, summaries and FAQs, are all things that humans would enjoy too. It's a richer experience. We forget that a lot of times when we are now building web pages and content, is that we want that to be a rich experience for our users so that they stay there and they get educated, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of that type of content.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, I think a lot of what we're doing in terms of optimizing pages for AI visibility, it's good stuff generally. There are other things that are less good for humans. And this is a really interesting thing because, of course, in the early days of search, where, rock bands wanted to sell tickets to their concerts, um, they wanted people to get to the web page. Actually, with a lot of the AI optimization, people are realistic. No one's coming to your web page. So, you've got to make sure that the content that you create appears in those AI answers because people aren't clicking through. And more to the point, and this is probably my number one GEO tip, you need to get your brand into the answer, which means on your website, you've got to start referring to your own brand. Because if AI engines are picking content from your website and you never use your own brand, which is quite common, right? It's really, it doesn't feel natural to say on the Napier website, hey, Napier does this and Napier does that. Normally you say we or whatever. If you don't have your brand on the pages, you don't appear in the answer. And then if people don't click through, they may get the information you wanted, but it's not going to be associated with you. It's just going to be information that they get, and that may not lead to a sale.
It seems like, we're in the same field we were in with all the SEO, all the white hat, black hat stuff. And that was, the emergence of content marketing anyway, of everybody trying to put out, helpful content. Are you seeing the same thing as brands kind of go after these, geo targets, trying to kind of optimize? Are they gaming it, or is it paying off with all these kind of real solutions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't think we're in the same situation we were in the early days of SEO. So I think in the early days of SEO, people were trying all sorts of stuff, and they were trying things that were really not great, and they weren't great for humans using the website, and they were really trying to mislead the search engines. And I think today, if you look at what's happening in GEO, yeah, there are some issues around GEO. There's a lot of people just spamming the internet by producing huge volumes of content that's not very high quality. But most of the people who are, really focused on GEO and are being successful, they're producing decent quality content. There are tools that, for example, will serve different content to the crawlers from the AI companies than it does to humans. That's a huge risk. I wouldn't go there. But I think, if you're trying most GEO tactics, they're actually probably quite helpful for humans. If you're writing an FAQ or a summary or a key takeaways, that's actually not a bad thing for a human. I'm sure we've all looked at an article, decided it's a bit long. If there was some key takeaways, it would be great. So my gut feel is that most of what's being done today for GEO actually will have legs. It'll actually long term continues to benefit the company. And that's a real surprise because, you'd think everybody would look at this and say, stuff we do now is going to benefit us for years in the future. We should really double down on this. But it seems like the take up of GEO, it's slower than I would have expected. I would have thought everybody would be on it. And certainly, thoughtful companies are jumping onto GEO. They recognize the importance. I mean, we've already, through our GEO, just for the agency, we've had inquiries from potential clients that we know of 100% come from our visibility in AI. So they're purely down to our GEO strategy and nothing else.
Yeah, and it amazes me too, because I kind of think about this time with Geo as almost like a gold rush, right? You're setting the foundation for your defensive strategy almost for all the other competitors there. And it's such an opportunity now because there are things that are known that do help, like the things you've been mentioning. You actually did a study, I think, of over 1,000 prompts across 4 engines on what gets brands cited. Any counterintuitive findings from that data?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting. We looked at the data, and in general, good quality content did well. Um, but some of the things you hear about GEO didn't necessarily apply because we're looking at technical B2B companies, and so whilst in the consumer world, for example, Wikipedia matters, Reddit matters. I mean, Reddit obviously has a deal with OpenAI, so Reddit is important. But for many of our the markets we work with, actually Reddit had very little impact. And the reason is people only discuss certain things on Reddit. And if you're looking at, some super technical semiconductor technology, nobody's really discussing that on Reddit. So it's about understanding the right places. I mean, for our clients, we see YouTube, particularly for Gemini, being really important. That's exciting. I mean, multimedia really matters now, far more than it ever has done, I would argue, for SEO. So we see that's being important. We also see LinkedIn articles. I mean, it's crazy because LinkedIn pretty much have almost obsoleted the article feature. They don't really talk about it. They don't seem to promote it. But actually, interestingly, LinkedIn is ranked as clearly ranked as a good site from the point of view of AI models. So they rank LinkedIn highly. They take the content. And if you're writing articles on LinkedIn, that can really help your AI visibility. So, it's really exciting. There's a lot going on and it's changing all the time.
Well, the LinkedIn articles is a great hack. Um, Also, a great hack is the LinkedIn newsletters, very similar, because you actually generate an email with those too, right? So you get a little double dip. So all your followers or subscribers get an email with your content. That's always a
Absolutely.
good
I
one.
totally agree with that. The LinkedIn newsletter really is a follow on from the articles, and it's a great tactic. And as you say, not just for GEO, but also to get your message out by email.
Yeah, it's efficient.
Yeah.
You mentioned data, and it seems like marketers. We've been around long enough in these tools. Marketers have been kind of drowning in data for years. All these, we were kind of the forefront of automation and business with marketing automation, 20 years ago, Salesforce and Marketo and HubSpot and other services that have been around for a long time. It seems like now we've got, you know, geez, 10 times more data or 100 times more data. How is that impacting your clients and how are you kind of helping them with the onslaught of all of this data?
So I think that's really interesting. One of the biggest challenges is integrating all of the data that people have. And we're doing a lot of work with clients to go and crunch that data. I mean, this is again where AI comes in and is really helpful. Clients will give us, for example, sales data for a particular product, and they'll ask us, where's it selling? And more importantly, who are the companies in the sectors where the product is selling well that aren't buying the product? Because, if you've got a great product, we did something that sold to induction furnishers, a great product for people who are using induction heating to melt metal. Fantastic. And we found that about 50% of the market was buying the product, 50% wasn't. What you do, you look at that 50% that's not buying it and you start talking about the product. And we were able to take that and directly track sales. It's still a bit manual, but I think more and more people are building, much better end-to-end campaigns. The thing that amazes me is that there's still companies that aren't using even the most basic data. I mean, we did some research recently where we signed up on websites and we looked at three different industries. We looked at materials handling, we looked at the pneumatics industry, and we looked at the semiconductor industry. So three very, very different industries. And I've got to admit, I kind of thought pneumatics, compressed air, it's kind of old technology. They're going to be way behind. But actually, the truth was that they were pretty solid. Um, they were miles ahead of materials handling, where actually the vast majority of companies collect your data and then never send you an email, which is crazy. I've given them the email because I want data, because I want emails, I want marketing, I want to learn about them. And they never send you an email. I mean, that's unbelievable. And then on the other end, we had semiconductors. We had one semiconductor company that decided to invite us to, I think it was something like 6 webinars with 9 emails in 1 week. And maybe electronics engineers have nothing to do today. I don't know, but I'm not sure how many people are going to attend 6 webinars. So I think it's using that data sensibly is super important. And still today, people are making really basic mistakes.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. Almost every job I've ever taken, the first thing I do is pick up the phone and call the phone number on the website and fill out all the forms, right? And because you want to know what's going out, and then you turn and you do it to all your competitors, so you know where you stand. It's literally the first thing I do, and it's amazing how many companies take your data and never use it, or you'll get a random email, a year and a half later, and you're like, oh my god, really?
Yeah.
The
And that's
the
always
thing
a
you
strange thing. Yeah.
eh, the thing you said, well, and what's funny is, I went to an email conference a couple years ago, and there was a gentleman talking, and he said, he goes, "I always get asked what's too much email, and the answer is your customer knows, right? They'll tell you when it's too much because they'll start unsubscribing wildly." Right. And so he goes, he was a proponent of sending more email because in reality, the email flies by us like a feed, right? You don't even see it half the time. So you do have to send more than one. It's, like telling your kid to do something. They're not going to do it the first time.
Yeah.
Going back to
I
what you're
agree.
saying about kind of your selling and analyzing the selling and the sales. Um, as marketers and Googlers and analytics people, the biggest problem we've ever had is attribution. Google thought they solved it, and it's worse than ever. Um, how are you kind of getting at attribution these days, especially with this AI economy?
Yeah, I think the way I'd answer that is I don't care about attribution. And that's not because I don't care about knowing what happens, but I think the problem is so much of attribution is just misleading data. And it's very much the who touched it last kind of thing. What I care about is growing sales, so incrementality. So my example is we work with a client who's got an online shop, and the online shop's got a slightly different domain. So the domain is not the main client site. It's slightly different. They've got a separate brand for it. It's really cool, but it confuses customers. So you'll actually see a lot of customers typing that online shop into Google. And when we started working with the client, we were looking at their Google Ad strategy, and one of their big strategies was to bid a lot of money against this online shop term. And I said to them, I said, what do you think people are doing when they type in the name of your shop? And I said, well, they're going to buy something. And I said, if you're the first organic result, what are they going to do? And they go, well, they're going to click it because that's what they want. And I said, now, if you put an ad above it, other than giving Google money it doesn't really need, how's it going to change the behavior? And the answer was, it's not. So you've got ads there, which from an attribution point of view, were killing it. I mean, they were making loads of money, but I can tell you that almost certainly they added zero to the sales of the client. And we see a lot of that where people are doing things that, can look great from an attribution point of view because, it's if I can use a soccer term, it's like knocking the ball in from just in front of the goal, from the 6-yard line. It's really easy to do, but you've done all the hard work to get there. And then you claim all the credit. And actually, what really matters is that whole customer journey. So actually, we're much more focused on building customer journey models, understanding what matters, and then working out not how we get, how we get a credit for someone who moves from one stage to another, but how we get someone who wasn't going to move to actually move forward in that journey and ultimately get that person who wasn't going to buy to change their mind and buy, because that's where marketing adds value.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the whole concepts that we're talking about have been the same since the printing press, right? Um, this is all the same good white hat content marketing, educating the customer type of stuff, but we're just doing it in different tools now. And like you're saying with the data, it is amazing to me. Um, the exact thing that you're saying is how many people don't use data, and then the others that are struggling with too much data and almost are paralyzed by it. And it's going to be
Yeah,
interesting as AI kind of makes sense of all of that.
I mean, data's hard. Data's really hard. If I, for example, ran a shop, I was running a hi-fi shop, and I was selling hi-fis. And as people come in and buy hi-fis, I'll ask them what the last thing they saw that had my name in before they bought, and they say it's a sign above the shop. And if I was using attribution as the way to measure, the impact of my marketing, none of my marketing would get any kind of credit. The sign at the front of the shop would get everything. And, I'd put all my money into the world's best, shop front sign. And it might help a little bit, but you're going to miss a whole lot of customers that you were reaching, whether it was through online advertising or email or, whatever else. And I think this is my frustration with attribution, and my frustration, to be honest, with MarTech generally, is MarTech tools love spewing like tables of data at you without any real thought or insight. And I think, that's one big thing. If marketers could level up and get better, it's about moving from data to insight. That's what really matters. And we'll all, I can almost feel people nodding and going, yeah, of course, yeah, of course. It's just incredible how many people, when you're in that day to day, you've got to get stuff done, you're under pressure from your boss, you forget about it and you just go for ticking the boxes and not really making those great campaigns.
Yeah, and it is. I think you wrote that we're kind of brandifying marketing and not and kind of getting away from that personalization, and it does seem that way. It seemed like kind of personalization failed a little bit. Um, is it coming back?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Wow. Is personalization coming back? I think it is. I think the reality is that good personalization is a lot harder than we thought it was when we started. when we started on the journey, we thought, and we started gathering data in our marketing automation systems, we thought personalization was quite easy. And we thought that putting a name out there and a company, that's going to really move the needle. And now kind of people are used to it and it doesn't really help. And having said that, actually, there'll be people screaming at me going, I ran a campaign on LinkedIn and I put the target company's name in and the results were way better. Yeah, okay, it does help. And I get it. It does help. But it's not quite that universal solution. I think the problem with personalization is that, and I'm going to blame the MarTech vendors for this, when MarTech vendors looked at personalization, they thought it was all about content. And they thought it was about saying, Mike, as a chairman of an agency called Napier, based in Chichester in the UK, you're bound to like this. Personalization is not about that. Okay, so my example would be if they're trying to sell me a car, that doesn't matter. What really matters is timing, because I've literally just bought a car like last week. So believe me, anything you send me about new cars now is going to have no impact at all, because I'm not in the market for a new car for a very long time. Anybody sending me, information about cars, particularly cars that I was interested in, 2 months ago, they had a really good chance of changing my decision. But I think if we look at where a lot of marketing is going, and particularly in B2B, people really struggle to understand where customers are in the customer journey. And that's killing personalization, because the personalization then becomes bland and, pretty formulaic. And so understanding timing, that I think is, to be honest, I think it's one of the big challenges of MarTech over the next few years.
Yeah, it's interesting. It'd be fun to run a campaign where you just asked clients. Maybe you put out an email with it says, where are you in the journey to buy your car? And you get some buying signals that way. You've expanded slightly outside of the PR and marketing world into the AI coaching world with Coachable AI. You're on the board there. Tell us about Coachable AI and what drew you into that.
Yeah, so I've done a bit of work with Coachable. They have an unbelievably good product. So it was a case of actually being able to work with a product that I wanted to use. It's that simple. And what they do is they basically use AI to simulate sales calls. And we were trying to train people up, improve sales calls. So that it was just amazing. And actually, to be honest, I've stopped working with the guys now. They're on a real rocket ship. It's amazing technology. But to me, that's one of the incredible uses of AI. Because if you think about the alternative and the human alternative, it's actually not that great. And anyone who's been in sales, and I've been in sales, you get these sales role plays you have to do typically
It's
with
the
your
worst.
boss.
It's the worst.
It is so embarrassing and
So painful.
so difficult. Yeah. And your boss hates it as well. That's the only good thing
Just
about
as
it.
much.
Yeah. And the thing you want to do, because you're talking to your boss, you want to get it right every time. And so you're very much like, what would the boss expect me to say? I'm going to say that. And it doesn't help you. If you're talking to an AI and trying to pitch, you just throw anything out there. You don't care, because the AI is not human. It doesn't matter. And so you just try different ideas and you experiment. And so the product is just incredible, because it doesn't just replace something that was done by humans. It actually brings it to a completely different level. And it makes it so much easier for salespeople to benefit, from this role play approach. So, that's why I think the company is absolutely phenomenal, incredible founder, and in a tough market though, because selling tools to salespeople is always hard, but I'm really excited to see where they go.
It's like marketing tools to marketing people.
Exactly. Exactly.
Somehow I picked that role.
It's a tough world. And obviously you talked about how you market to salespeople. It's really hard, and how you position products, and, really building that whole go-to-market strategy. It's tough for a lot of people, and in areas that are emerging, and AI is generally speaking, most AI tools aren't going to look like they look like today in a year's time. Building your go-to-market strategy now today, if you've got anything that's high tech, it's really hard to do, because the world's changing so quickly. You know, you look at what AI is doing to software. Software can be developed so much faster now. So, you know, even like SaaS products are moving quicker than they've ever done before. It's really exciting, but it's really, really difficult because, you know, you can't create a strategy, run it for 3 years, and then see how it's worked out because things will change, you know, and I find that really interesting.
Yeah. Well, Mike, if you could give every B2B marketing leader out there a prompt to put into Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini today, if they're kind of falling behind on AI and they're kind of falling behind on Geo in their B2B marketing, what's the prompt that they put in to kind of start getting up to speed?
Well, so I can tell you don't work at Napier because people have asked me this and nobody asked me a second time. So I would say if you're asking for a prompt, you're actually asking for the wrong thing because particularly with ChatGPT, where you get the most information, the best advice is where you have a conversation. It's backwards and forwards. And one prompt doesn't give you that. So I guess if I had to do one prompt and you know, play by the rules, and my dad always told me to play by the rules, so I'm going to do it. You know, I'd probably say, I'm developing a, you know, let's say a marketing campaign on Google for this particular product. Give me 20 questions I should ask you to be able to develop a great campaign. And I think that's the way I'd approach it. You know, it's about asking a lot of campaigns. And I think, you know, people very glibly say, oh, it's like a, you know, assistant. AI should be seen as assistant, it should be helping you, it should be accelerating you. And then it's like, well, what prompt do I put in? And the answer is, no, you talk to it like an assistant and you get help. And, you know, you ask it questions and you throw ideas at it and see what it says. So I think for me, the most important thing with AI is make it a conversation. Don't make it a question and answer.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate all your help on all the judging, all your expertise on B2B marketing. This has really been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. Really appreciate it, Russ.